Welcome back to Into the River. Today, I'm excited to introduce my guest. Her name is Diane. She has been a friend of Brad's for quite some time, and she's here to kind of share her experience. She never really got fully caught up in the Tory stuff, but she has a lot of good perspectives as someone who caught some of the red flags early on. So welcome, Diane.
Hi, Ashley Joe. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming on. I'm really excited because you have a perspective that is very valuable because you were in the community up until recently, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
I joined because Brad had joined.
And when was this?
Had to be a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Okay. And you joined the stateroom when it was started?
We did.
Okay.
And it was in Central Florida, and that we became part of that particular group.
And what caused you to join? Obviously, your friendship with Brad.
He had been watching Tory for a number of months already, and he was just so gung-ho, and he was telling me he was thrilled to death, so excited about being involved in videotaping her videos, but doing it in 15-minute sections or less, to get the pertinent parts that he felt were the most important, because she does do a lot of hums and ohs and stories and filler that he cut out most of the time. And also because in his program on the computer, he could only do it in 15-minute segments at the most. So it made it very easy for him to go forward, taking the bits and pieces that he really wanted to share with people and posting them to his site in whatever we're on, Telegram.
Yeah, no, that got a really decent sized following too. I just found about it when he changed, ironically, but then I was like, oh, this has been here forever. It's kind of amazing that he did that, because there's so many times that you want to find like something, and to go through a 3 or 4 hour episode is crazy. So the fact that he would put descriptions on them and all of that was really quite the task.
I'm not sure how really how he did that, because he was spending 10, 12 hours a day doing that.
Wow.
And that would be just his Tory Says contribution for the day.
Wow.
And then he was still doing work. So he'd do a filing because they wanted to do a filing, or they wanted writs of mandamus done, or CTAs. He would do those on top of all of that. And then he had group meetings up by us, and they had group meetings down in Tampa or Clearwater. And for us, that was always an hour, minimum an hour, usually hour and 15, 20 minutes to any of the meetings. And if we went to any of the dinners, it then became 2, 3, 4, 5 hour drives. So, but it was very interesting at first. And he wanted me to be involved in Tory because he thought she had so much information to impart. He thought what she was giving us was something we needed to have as part of the Trump organization, to get us all back together again and to get Trump put back in. And he believed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of us did, except for you have a little bit of a different story, and you stayed in the group up until December when you were removed, right?
Correct.
And but you didn't necessarily view Tory the same way as the rest of us did. Can you kind of share like your experience from start to finish, just finding her initially, what your thoughts were when maybe things started to kind of pop up as red flags?
Well, Brad insisted that I start watching her programs. And so I tried to watch her program direct, and literally 3 or 4 hours sitting and listening to her just went right through. I couldn't do it. Granted, and Brad would be the first to say, he'd say there'd be something important in every single message that she gave, but sometimes you really had to sit and listen to it. And, I'd go 2 hours and find nothing and think, I got better things to do. So then I went to watching his 15-minute vignettes, and those were actually lovely, just lovely, because then you would get the perspective that he was seeing without having to sit through all the chats. And so I did watch a lot of those, and I agreed with him. I thought she had a lot of really good information to impart. So when we started with the groups going to the Central Florida group meetings, there were so many really interesting people in the group that I was thrilled to go every weekend. I didn't care if it was couple of hours. I just really preferred it when we went to meetings where the primary focus was what on everybody was bringing to the meeting personally. But it started changing, and we started going to places that the primary focus was the food, and then the information was whatever time left anybody had, and I'm not into that. So that first year of meetings to me was all important. I met people that I'm going to be very sad to lose if we fall to the wayside. And I know I've already lost some of them because we never really did speak outside of the meetings. So I'm sad about that.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing that's been happening, but it's really good to hear that you guys had an organic thing in the beginning. Like some states, I feel like, I can't speak for all states, but one thing I've heard is that happened with a lot of states was like an initial like hit the ground running enthusiasm, and a lot of work was being done. I know I came in a little later to California, but my boyfriend was in the room for maybe a year before I came in, or since its inception, and he used to do Zoom meetings, listen to the Zoom meetings every week, and they were tossing around ideas. And I know that everyone had this passion, but then I started to notice, and he would tell me as well, that like certain admins were like knocking out people's ideas, booting them out of legal rooms, and like starting to want the ideas to only come through them. And their ideas never really came to any kind of like good outcome. So when did you see the pattern shifting and changing? Like, oh wait, is there like connections you can make from when it went from organic and more free to kind of a big nothing burger?
The admin who was running our group was not keeping it very strictly controlled. We literally would have 8, 10, 15 people there in the meetings. And there would be 4 or 5 different conversations going on. So a lot of times you'd kind of pick the people you wanted to start off speaking with, and you'd be sharing your information, and then you just kind of check back in on the other groups to see what they were talking about if it was something you wanted to switch over. Our admin in the group, who was an admin for Central Florida, she always came in with some ideas on what you would like to see addressed, like the CTAs that they were looking to have done, and she would recommend that we do them. She and Brad would often discuss what he was looking to prepare for, because Tori would be preparing a filing in Ohio, and it would be something that should be done in all the different states. Brad would do that. Nobody else was doing it. So whatever it was that Tori was doing, Brad would look to duplicate or create another type of file to submit to the courts. And then we had a couple of people that belonged to that group that were really, I think to them, it was more of a social occasion, always. And they were the ones that started getting us into other locations. There was a great location, Conservative Watch, down in Clearwater, it was literally a Patriots group, or a Patriots setting. The problem was that there was one person that started showing up, not with our group, but would sit just outside the group with his computer going and would keep an eye on us. It was kind of weird. And a few people were starting to feel like they were being watched, or maybe we were being watched and recorded, because the computer was always up and on while he was there. And so they wanted to change locations. And when we changed locations, going to Abby's in Tampa was a great place. But after we moved out of Abby's and started going to like this Detroit Coney Dogs, and it literally fell apart.
Interesting. So at this time, did you notice, like, what was your room like as far as a working space? Was there, because I can just speak to California, there was a time when it was more free, and then it moved into, seemed like more rules, like you can't be a part of this group, that group. It was kind of restrictive as to what people could share. Did you see any of that in Florida? No, that's good.
Not originally, no.
Really?
The admin who ran our Central Florida group was very open to new ideas and to what everybody wanted to do. She would direct a little bit, but she did not set up restrictions or guidelines. None of that
Awesome.
was part of what made it such an awesome meeting.
That's really good for other states to hear that it's different in some states, that if you're in a really restrictive state, that there's some states like Florida, at least at the time, that handled it differently and it was more free. That's really good to hear.
I'm hoping it happened in other groups than just ours.
No, I believe it did. Someone was sharing one state and some conversations that they were having recently, and it was not at all. I was like, wow, that is so much better than California. Like in my state, like you would have been removed. I know California recently has been doing a big cleaning out of people who have been faithful members forever, and there's no explanation as to why, of course. And it's really sad. I don't know if it's a sense of paranoia, but for some reason, my state was one of the most restrictive, freaked out, paranoid states ever. Like they implemented rules that I don't even think came from Tory. It was so bad, or maybe it did, but well, it's good to hear that didn't happen. So as far as listening to Tory, you were hearing good information. Was there a time for you personally where you maybe, well, like, was there a shift where you broke away from believing her, or did you always kind of like think that, well, she's giving some good information and some not so good information?
For me, it was always sort of a 50-50. Having come from the Silva mind control background, I have never gotten caught up in anything of that nature ever again, and didn't with Tory. And I think that's where she was heading.
Was there anything that gave you that indication that you can remember? I'm sure there was a lot, but
what was odd was how everybody was listening to Tory, and I mean, everything she said was pearls of wisdom, and it was like, there was an awful lot of things that she said that was just chit chat. And you ended up having to tie it all together, and still, even pearls of wisdom comes with a bit of sensibility that you have to put in behind everything she's saying. Nothing is 100%. This is her perspective too on things. I mean, her saying she was a time traveler and that she had seen all this, and then things weren't coming to pass. And I think that's kind of what started to niggle on with Brad, was that there were a few things all of a sudden. It seemed like the things that she was saying were going to happen just suddenly didn't start happening.
Yeah, we've actually compiled quite the list of that. If you keep updating of predictions, it's like, oh, there's so many, but there's always a reason for it. And I think that's one of those breakaway moments for people when they start to be like, wait a second, and I'll still see in our chats like, wait, you said this was going to happen, it didn't. And when I do, I find hope, because for some people that's their walk away moment, or their like critical thinking moment. But for some of the hardcore followers, they will justify even false predictions. And that's where these like beautiful statements like, we've shifted the timeline, or you didn't do enough, or misinformation is necessary. Those things come into that, what I believe is mind control, where it's basically like, I can say all these things, and the whole premise of my entire platform is I said it, so therefore. And now you have this mockingbird situation where all of her listeners are saying, she said, and she's reposting them. And even she's saying, I said. And I'm like, no wonder you called it that. Like, it's all a big joke. That's essentially turning your followers into a Simon Says game. And when you're wrong, all they do is say, misinformation is necessary and all of these things. So that gives you an escape route for ever having to admit fault.
That's
and
right.
It's really kind of crazy to watch, and to know that I was a part of it. I know I've said it on here before, but I used to do these things where I would create these fantastical realities in my mind because something would conflict with what Tori said. So my answer, instead of being like, she's wrong, was like, well, what does she really mean? I create this scenario, and I'd be on the phone with my closest friend at the time, and we would just be creating these fantastical, delusional, ridiculous worlds in our brain that we actually believed. And it was whatever we had to do to make sure that she remained the queen. remained on the pedestal, and we had to reshape ourselves to become something that didn't match with my spirit, at least didn't match with my critical thinking abilities. I definitely wasn't trusting my gut. I was shaping myself. Someone in Brad's chat yesterday was talking about something to that nature. Like, she said this and she also said the opposite at different times. And I was like, well, don't you know you're supposed to like reform who you are to somehow
According to her
learn
timeline.
exactly, to learn to believe two things are real at one time, which is cognitive dissonance at its finest. And so, yeah, it's really hard to watch that.
Well, it was really very difficult because I didn't get caught up in Tory the way Brad was. I mean, he was literally, he could hardly wait to watch the next version and start taping and.
Me too.
And I just didn't, I didn't see it. I didn't believe it the way he was going down with it. And he was making excuses too for things that, prognostications that didn't occur. And he said, well, she gave it a different timeline. Yeah, well, I believe in timelines and I believe in shifting timelines, but at a certain point, things have to quit. I mean, there has to be a reality meets up with the story. And it just never seemed to touch base at a certain point. And he was still doing it and still, I mean, he was videotaping right up, but he's still videotaping whatever he can get his hands on. But I never got caught up with Tori the way he did. Never. I did not see her as a be all end all to what I needed to believe. And I certainly wasn't taking her version of reality and calling it mine. I didn't do that.
No, that's a really good thing though. But I also appreciate that you stayed in the community because the people. Is it because of the people and just the work? Yeah.
And I believe in Trump.
Yeah.
And that was the whole focus for me to start with. And I'm not sure exactly when the focus shifted to Tory away from Trump, but it did.
Yeah, it really did.
And all our work was geared towards was getting Trump back and verifying the work that he had done and the reality of his background and in the presidency. And it just suddenly became superfluous.
That's true. She really doesn't talk about anything that's like helping Trump anymore. I feel like that did change because I remember in the beginning, some of my favorite episodes, I felt such a strong sense of patriotism coming from her show. She used to play Trump's speeches, and I'm not saying she won't in the future. I'm sure she will, but like it was very centered on our president, and I loved that. And then come to think of it, she kind of quit talking about that. And even, I don't know if you've paid attention, but her most recent CTA it's FOIAing the FBI, trying to get public the documents that they took from the Mar-a-Lago raid. And she's insinuating that it's about Julian Assange, which I call bullshit. I don't think this has anything to do with Julian Assange. She seems very angry that the FBI didn't release whatever they uncovered during that raid. And as I sit back and I use my skills, my critical thinking skills, and I ponder on what is this really about? All I can see is that in her last show, the show before, she suggested that there's evidence of a crime in these documents. And if the FBI doesn't do anything about it, then that's a problem. And she's saying it's going to incriminate Mitch McConnell or whoever. But I'm like, if you're essentially, what people aren't saying is you're essentially saying Trump was in possession of evidence of a crime.
Correct.
So what the fuck are you doing right now? And what are these people who are well-meaning, who believe that they're freeing Assange, which is sad. But I think that they're participating in something that could only harm Trump and the people who are sending in these FOIAs.
I think that is the point.
I do too.
It's intended to harm Trump.
Yeah.
And the whole re-election or running for election again. And I don't see it helping the Republican Party, quite honestly.
No.
Any of it. And I'm afraid at this point that the Republican Party is in no better shape than the Democrat Party. You see what they're doing. So it's a one-party system, and the only one that's really coming out getting hurt is all of us.
Absolutely. And look at us, like if this is 3 years after we all woke up, and then 2 years after the election that was stolen, now you have us in no better position. We're not smarter, we're not sharper. I'm not saying all of us, some of us are, but like those of us who got sidetracked by these grifting influencers, Red String Queen Tori literally took us down rabbit holes this whole time and had us chasing our tails in the most ridiculous ways. And I'm like, and she's so all over the place. In the beginning, I feel like there was a focus. And then it turned into, emailing the Gang of Eight and doing this and doing that and all of these like rabbit holes and directions. And today she's bragging about shutting down the line of communication to the FBI. And she thinks that's a good thing. And she's trying to get people to think it's a good thing that we shut down a line of communication. I'm like, no, you're making a mockery of the American people, of patriots, of hardworking, freedom-loving citizens by getting us to act in unison like we're Antifa and go bully our way through these avenues that are intended to help us. Do they help us? Not necessarily, but if they don't help us, then why are we spamming them? One, because they're not going to help us. Two, why are we shutting it down and therefore preventing anyone else who might have a valid complaint from being heard?
That's true. But you've got so many people that in all these different groups that are running around like lemmings, just willing to throw themselves off the edge of the earth.
No, it's heartbreaking.
Do it.
Yeah, I was doing that too. And I think there was a certain point, I can't remember when I started questioning the CTAs. First, the copy paste thing never made sense to me. I was just like, why do you need hundreds and thousands of people to send the same exact FOIA request? It's like one good person. We had one good person in California who, to her credit, she was really good at FOIA. She had developed a relationship with the people in these offices through kind, constant communication. So it got to the point where they knew her and they were willing to hand over more information to her. And that just shows the power of one person who does it right and who takes the time to develop that relationship is going to get further than thousands of people spamming, not really being able to explain why they're doing what they're doing, which is even more heartbreaking.
Correct.
Yeah. So, okay. Same page with all of that. I want to kind of get back to Brad in the room a little bit, because one thing that's really been frustrating me is watching Emmy, who claims to be in Florida, whether she is or not. She's very active in the Florida group as of late. Was she active when you were in there?
You know what? I didn't even know who she was at first until she started attacking Brad. And he was communicating with her and with, dare I say, Carrie, and Laura Chicks. And the conversations got so heated and there was so much disinformation going around. They were, if they'd been in the same room, these would have been bloody battles.
Yeah.
With everybody literally clawing away at each other. It was like it had become a power play instead of anything else.
And when did this start happening that you recall?
Probably early last year sometime.
So Emmy wasn't really involved in a helpful way or in participatory way that you were aware of, but she shows up starting to attack Brad.
Well, I don't think Emmy was part of it. Is a much later,
say that again, you cut out.
A much later addition to what was on the chat sites.
So she was a more recent addition.
Correct.
Okay.
Trying to think, Chicks, whatever her name was, Laura Chicks and Carrie. They started the fight a long time ago.
So the best of your recollection, why do you think that Brad was a target? Was there something that he did? Because right now the narrative that Emmy is pushing, even though she wasn't really around then or active, but yet she's claiming to know everything. That's a theme I've seen in these admins. They talk to each other and behind closed doors, and they tell each other about each other's states. And then one of them that you've never heard of that lives across the country will all of a sudden think they know all about you, even though they've never interacted with you.
They show up in your state chat.
Exactly. So what do you think? Oh, what was my question? What do you think that the narrative that's being pushed right now by Emmy and Tori herself, actually, a couple times on her show has said, Brad was just always this crazy type that nobody liked and they wanted to get rid of, and that he's like, everything he's saying is a lie. I know that not to be true about Brad. I know you definitely know that not to be true. So what do you think it was that changed it, got them to start attacking him?
Ooh. Well, he never does anything quietly, first off.
What?
What? Yeah. If he's writing something for the courts, he makes sure that everybody knows what
Yeah.
he's doing and why and what he's expecting to get from it. And I think a lot of people were really jealous because, or if not jealous, then intent on stopping him simply because the point was that perhaps it was Tori who didn't want things to be surfacing in the court systems. Not really. That was why all the CTAs and the push for all these letters and contacting your state's representatives, because that really never gets anything done.
Real quick, there's some background noise you probably don't know is coming through. I just want to let you know.
Oh, okay.
It's not a big
Can we
deal.
hold off on the bags, John? It's interrupting. Okay, I'll get them. I'll get them. Thank you.
Sorry, it's not a big deal. I just figured. Okay. So he's vocal because that's the thing is like, that's what the whole point of these rooms are, is to talk about what we're working on, share ideas. And one thing that he was doing that I didn't even realize until I found him was he was sharing these packets of like how to with sample letters and like, yes, sharing, like, that's what, I mean, I would have killed to have someone like that in California, because I was an admin twice, even when I wasn't. Anyone, like, it seems like the people who were doing the work kept it super secretive and they didn't want to share what they were working on. They didn't want to teach anyone how to do it. They didn't want to help anyone. They couldn't answer questions about their lawsuits when you asked them, which is really weird. But if I would have had someone like Brad in our room, I would have been like, this is a resource. This is a person I can go to. Like, and I feel like I know that he would have been more than happy to help anyone. And that's what we need.
He was developing manuals and how-tos for hoping that these were things that he could pass out to everybody, because without them, a lot of people had no idea where to start. And how anybody who's not used to working in the court system can expect to possibly put together filings that made sense, that would be acceptable by the court, it doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. But so, and I think from his work in the court system years ago, he was used to doing these manuals. He was used to putting together informational brochures and things. So, but once he developed them and he put them out there on the sites, for Tori says, it was like they disappeared. They really didn't want them being given out. Didn't want the people to be able to have something to develop a way forward for each of their groups, to do something that would actually count for something. They wanted them to keep spinning their wheels. And the manuals that he had prepared that could have been modified state to state to adjust according to the laws in the state, it was never really permitted. And he would bring these manuals and all these brochures and how-tos with him to all the meetings. And a lot of times they would just not get distributed. Not because he didn't want to, but they just wouldn't distribute.
Well, bless him for trying. I mean, the tenacity is such a beautiful thing that he just kept fighting and wouldn't give up. And definitely one thing I experienced is the people that were like him that we had early on in California were removed from the legal rooms, as he was, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And
he never did get the legal help that they had promised him. They said that Tori had 2 attorneys, and that if you were actually working to put something into the court system, that you could get some question answer situations going, so that you could at least know that what you were doing was the right direction. And he never had an attorney call him back. Never. Of course never not. Never got any help from anybody who had legalese either. Never had heard from anybody else who was filing things so that they could work together.
Yeah, that's not surprising. It's not surprising, but it is sad. I mean, it seems so simple to me with a simple structure and organization. Oh, this place could be incredible, but clearly that was never the intention. But all you have to do is have a main central room with people who can share everything that's happening across the country, just like Brad was talking about, that he would like to do in the future. And that gets to people can come in that space and take it to their state, what works, what doesn't work. When you insert the hierarchical structure and the admin situation in that, and you start to safeguard against people having access to information, that's when there becomes a problem. And then you enter personalities and titles and tiaras and dictator types in every state. That's when it's almost impossible to get anything done. And I know that he had told me that the meetings kind of turned into, like, as you said, more of a social gathering type of thing. Were you around when like Tori started to visit and they weren't inviting people to certain meetings and all of that?
Yes. Tori actually came to Florida a couple times. I know she was meeting with some of the state representatives. She met with, oh darn, what's his name up north? Sorry, I was just talking about this with him the other day too.
In Florida?
She came into Florida. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I know there's a Neptunus and a J.
Yeah.
Not
and
them.
No, she actually came into town to meet with some of the politicians.
Oh, gotcha.
Supposedly. And she didn't tell anybody except those closest to her.
And these were like admins in your room that were closest to her, or just people in the group?
Well, people in the group. We had some people that were running for office in Florida that were, I don't believe they were, no, they weren't admins, but they were running for public office. And some of those people were part of the clique, the hierarchy clique. And those people knew. It was like that last party that they had, nobody ever found out. Or they also had another party for what, sci-fi buffs, that it was just the usual clique that attended too.
So she came for the important people.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was pretty much it. Nobody else found out until after she'd come and gone.
That makes sense.
There was never any input either into what she, for questions that she could ask that were pertinent for us here in Florida.
Yeah,
So
well, you guys are just the little people.
Well,
it seems
but he's doing the filings.
Oh, 100%. I mean that sarcastically. Like that's the whole contradiction to the message. You're leaders. You are, no one should ever get in your way. Don't let them steamroll you. All of these things. It's all bullshit. She wants to rub shoulders with the people she deems as important, or people that she is groomed into being completely controllable to do her whatever bidding for, but she doesn't give a shit about regular people. And it comes out all the time for anyone who can hear her, you know, just the way that she talks about people, calling them losers and all this stuff that I've covered. But yeah, it's just heartbreaking. I've heard of so many states say that when she did come, I mean, they were so excited. I would have driven 5 hours to see her if she came to California. I felt that way about her too. But they said that she would show up hours late. She would just be very dismissive about why she was late. There was a lack of giving a shit. One person said she showed up 2 hours late and a couple people had to leave because there's no respect for people's times. We do have lives.
There was no respect.
No respect. And then she said, oh, sorry, I was driving around trying to get flowers delivered to you guys. It's just some bullshit story. It's like, you don't get flowers delivered when you're in town. You stop by the grocery store and bring some flowers.
That's right.
But it's all disrespect, and she doesn't care. I know multiple people who were like, they loved her until they met her in person, and they were like, that's when I saw it. And I think it's really helpful to see people in person. Maybe part of the reason she doesn't show her face too often.
Well, you know, that's also, if you look at the icon of her face that's used on all the website videos that she was doing, you really never, what you saw was a beautiful woman with this, at this odd angle, and very intriguing looking. And when you meet her, we met her in the West Palm Beach dinner and she came late, obviously came very late. And yes, people had already started leaving by the time she showed up. Brad went over and purposely introduced himself, but she doesn't look like much. She doesn't.
Yeah.
And she was very dismissive of everybody that wasn't part of the clique.
Yeah.
Brad went over and he was talking with her and he introduced himself, put his arm around her shoulder for pictures. And she was like, the body language was, please don't touch, go away. And he didn't see it. And I'm watching and I'm thinking, I don't know what he's doing, but she's not happy. And so she had no desire to know Brad, none.
Yeah. That's crazy to me, because Brad, like the people that I've met, the people that I've interviewed, the people that have been treated so horribly, I'm like, how could you not want to know these people? Like my girl Audra in California, that's one of the heartbreaking ones. I found out recently, it's so messed up because Audra loved her and shared all of her posts in her group. She mentioned her on her podcast every single episode, like so loyal, even though she had been removed from the state group, removed from all these places, and just treated horribly by admins. And she would still give Tori praise. And then we just found out, I think it was last week, it came out that when she was removed, that it was actually Tori that did it. And that just broke her heart, I'm sure, because it's like, all these years of just loving this person and getting shit on by the admins and thinking it's the admins. And that's where I think that a lot of people get stuck in that place. I know I got stuck in that place for a while. Like I didn't make the connection. This was just how Tori runs things, and that it's very intentional. Once you realize that is when freedom really does come. But it is heartbreaking because she just obviously does not give a shit about actual people.
No.
At all. She recently, actually, there was, and I don't know the story is 100%, the backstory is correct, but I do know that the situation that happened is correct. So there was someone on True Social, this account that I recently started following after this experience, but Tori reposted that this person, I guess one of Tori's fans tagged this girl or guy, whoever it is, because they have a big following on Twitch or something. And they tagged this person basically saying, you should do these FBI FOIAs with us, or talk about them or whatever. Well, this person looked at it and responded, I want no part of that. So Tori clips that. This person doesn't follow Tori at all. She just has a big following, or he. Tori clips that, puts that person on blast in her red phone, and then says something to the effect of, remember everyone who didn't want to help Assange and make a list. And I'm like, now you're threatening and I believe that Tori probably had someone go, try to get this girl's attention or guy's attention because they have a following. Right now, she's going on Twitter Spaces, trying to talk with these other red stringer people, trying to get more people desperately into her room. But that's the only people she seems to care about, is people who have followings, whether she's shit talking them or praising them. She's clearly networking and looking out for herself. But the second that person wasn't interested in being utilized, she wanted this person put on a list. And then I'm watching the vile comments underneath of people like UC, who was a friend of mine and recently called me a hoe, not to my face, of course, but she was one of those that had been treated like shit and kicked out of the community and had experienced such horrible things from these admins, and recently became an admin, and now is like, I was hoping maybe she would be a good one, and she's now just like the people who were tormenting her and doing shit to her. And she's under that comment saying FAFO to that person who didn't want to do a CTA. And I'm so confused. I'm like, so now not choosing to do a CTA because of your own reasons, because you're trusting your own discernment and gut, means you're fucking around and finding out? Like now we're threatening people who don't fall in line. What does that sound like to you?
Well, I think Brad was considered a threat to the organization simply because Brad took a look at things and saw what he felt needed to be done.
And he came with experience, correct? Not to cut you off, but he came with whistleblowing experience in government. So
yes, and he had the experience in filing in court and working with the documents and running through the systems and the court system itself. So he had that. So he wasn't in any way intimidated by working through the court system. And when he started getting banned for some of the things that he was saying and doing, I think that's what made him step back, is when they started cutting him off. It made him angry that they would think that what he had to contribute to the group wasn't worthy. But it was like those manuals. He had all the background and the know-how to contribute to help everybody else do a good job at what they thought they should be doing. And yet at some point the tide turned and everybody went from being told to create documents to submit to the court system to actually put the courts on notice that there was a problem in all the different states, because I don't even know that it reached that level before it shifted to doing CTAs on letters only. And that never really helps. I mean, we'd like to think that they listen to us, but especially when you do the blast letters, nothing comes of that. No. You know, they see another one come in and it hits the garbage. So.
Well, you essentially make their job easier. If they get one, they do have a responsibility to look at it and read it. When it becomes spam, you give them an out to where they can just take them all out.
Writing your own, it's garbage.
Yeah.
And
we're making a mockery of the system that's put in place to help us.
Exactly. So
they started going after him. You said there was one person in particular in the room who was just kind of always at him.
You know, and this was a friend of ours. Wasn't just part of the central group. She actually came because we asked her to come.
Oh, you invited her in?
Yeah, we did.
And she turned on Brad.
Well, you know what? She's still a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
And she's very smart, and she does a lot of work with children's issues, behavior acting, and local governments, and trying to get the CTA, the CRT and the SEC and SELs out of the schools, getting the porn out of the schools. I mean, those are her issues. That's where her priorities lie. But she was so concerned that Brad's priorities weren't her priorities. And I don't know that she ever got wrapped up in Tory either. I mean, I think she went because of the people and the ideas that she was hearing, and she could always shift gears at the meetings and get somebody to talk about the same things that were of priority to her. I don't know that she was ever a big Tory Says fan.
I gotcha. I know people like that who are kind of like a one topic fighter, and they're very passionate about it. And
right. Well, she's probably Doctors Without Borders. She's right there. Defend Florida for voting integrity and election integrity. She's right there. But when it came to Tory, when things came push to shove and Brad was spending all his time working on the documents, she never stopped. It was everything that Brad wanted to do was wrong. And she would be confrontational at all the meetings. It never failed. She would be confrontational in the car on the way to the meetings. So we never knew what shape we would arrive in, whether we'd be covered in ketchup or blood or. It was interesting.
Well, I think part of it is just a community. That's an element of it. You know, you're going to have different personalities. I could be wrong about this, but that is unfortunate. I mean, Brad told me, and you and I talked about it, that there was an admin who was actually trying to help when all of this stuff was going down, as far as like that person, like trying to break up arguments between that person and Brad.
This was the same admin that I had spoken about earlier, who was really good about allowing a lot of leeway for everybody in the group meetings. Yeah. She was never restrictive until things got out of hand, and then she would rein everybody back in and try to get things situated again. She did tell Brad on more than one occasion. We'll put it that way, because it was actually frequently that once he'd been banned and once he sort of gotten in trouble with the group, that she would go to bat for him. And I'm not saying she didn't, because she may have. You know how badly they can fight once you try to put in your own 2 cents on an issue that they've already made their decision about how it's going to be handled. You just get ignored. And I'm sure they did that to Pam. And she was very busy in her own life. She was working a job where she was working much more than 40 hours a week at it, and it was just a job. But she was a manager, and it was expected of her. And so she had that, and in her personal life, she had a lot of things going on. And here she's trying to stay on top of everything without being drawn into everybody's arguments and petty differences, and try to keep everything online or keep everything straight. and her life is falling apart. And then she decided at one point that there was just too much, so diamonds and tiaras?
Titles.
Titles and tiaras, thank you. Happening in the Florida groups, that she just wasn't willing to deal with it anymore. And she tried to step down as an admin and they wouldn't let her. She kept telling us, I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I don't want to be an admin. I don't want to be responsible for everything that's happening in the state and trying to keep everybody on track, especially when I'm being told that this is wrong, that this is the area that they want us to work in, not this one anymore. And there were people in Southern Florida that were given precedence over her. So she was never really in control. And so when she was telling Brad that she wanted to help, she would help. I think she probably did try, and she got shut back down.
When she was saying that she wanted to leave, was that publicly in the chat or was that privately with the other admins?
That was it was in the Central Florida group meetings.
Okay.
And then when she was talking specifically directly with Brad, there were some dinner meetings. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There was one dinner meeting that we attended. Trying to think of where we were at. There were so many dinner meetings. It was way south of us. I think it was a 2 or 3 hour drive there. And she got all upset with Brad on that date. And she was trying to get him to calm down. And then the other woman who was being confrontational was doing her bit. And I was trying to talk to Pam and keep her calm about it all, and just said, let them deal with it. It'll work its way out. And Brad was trying to talk with other people about the filing that he had going at the time and other ideas that he had and the manuals. And she just, at that point, wanted out. And that was late last year. She wanted out, period.
That's a really sad thing that I've noticed that happens. So there's different reasons for it, but using people to the point of exhaustion, or a good admin being stuck in a position where they realize that there's always going to be this tension, and that tension causes good people to leave the chats, and it causes good admins to be like, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When I stepped down, well, I didn't step down, when I was demoted by Tori, and then I decided to leave the room because I literally was just there thinking it could get better. And I had learned before that moment that it wasn't really something that I could control or help with. When I stepped down, a friend stepped down a little bit after me and left, and her and I were very close, and we both said we wouldn't ban, and Tori demoted me but didn't demote her. And I remember at the time her asking, like, why do you think she didn't demote me? And my only thought is, like, when they want people to stay, just like they did with Wonderland, they didn't want her to leave. I think that they want to break people apart. And also you have to have some people that the people like in position, but they can still be controlled. You know what I mean? It's like, because if you take away all the people that have favor within the room, and it sounds like she was an excellent admin, and you know what I mean? Like, she was good at what she did. When you remove those people, sometimes it's devastating to the point where, you have nobody left. So I think that
you lose the group.
You lose the group. Like, so I was like the outlier that could not be controlled. So I had to go. My friend was too. And I think that it was like they wanted to reel her back in. And that's just, they like to split up people, because once we start to unify, like I read I don't know if you heard it, but I read someone's story that they shared with me yesterday in a clip. They emailed me their story. And one thing they said was how sad it is that some people want to do the right thing, but they just get so battle weary, or they get so intimidated or fearful that they won't just speak up for another person. Mm-hmm. And she was like, what if we could all link virtual arms and stand against the tyranny of the admins? And I thought that was a really beautiful thing. And I've always thought that, and it goes right back to everything that Tori's taught us, even though she doesn't believe it. If we all stand up, it's game over. And I was always the one screaming, like, hey guys, it's not that hard, just say no. Like, if we can't take over this situation and get back to working and taking over our state group to make it a place where things actually get done, then how are we going to fix the government? How are we going to fix our local government? You know what I mean? If we can't overthrow a couple people with a title in a Telegram chat.
I know. Well,
But anyway.
I got the impression that Pam was being undermined. They wouldn't let her go.
Oh, yeah.
So she felt like she was needed, but she was being undermined in what she was being permitted to do and what she was being permitted to say and who she had to deal with. And I mean, confidence disappears. It just literally evaporates if you're not given enough.
They absolutely beat you down. Some of the people that are the most loyal right now to Tori and will turn on their neighbor in a heartbeat are the people who have gone through the worst beating down over and over. I'm talking Tori's blocked them. She's kept them, like called them out publicly, released shit about their family members, like just horrible stuff.
I'm sorry, but this is CCP type divisive behavior.
It is 100%. When you get that, you go through like that wood chipper experience over and over, you become this malleable piece of clay that Tori shapes into a guard dog, essentially, who attacks people, calls them Satan if they have a good question, cannot communicate or articulate any kind of decent discussion when it's a little bit of a different opinion. It's heartbreaking, but they become a mindless person.
Yes. She beats it out of them. I mean, the only thing she hasn't done is really hit them with truncheons and pipes. Exactly. But otherwise,
well, I think that the mental warfare is really dark and is really effective, and it comes over time. And I do want to get on that topic because you have some experience a little bit with that. But before we get there, let's kind of wrap up this first part as far as when Brad finally started to see the light, and you were there for that
near the end of last year.
Okay. And then it really ramped up when he decided to publicly call out the admins. And then quickly after that, him and I connected, and then he started hearing the stories, and we both were in the process of realizing this is so much deeper. So like, what is your experience like watching him transition out? How has that been?
He had a tough time with it. He likes to think that he didn't, but he battled himself the whole time. I think if it hadn't been for you and him getting your story and the stories of the people that you've been talking to and interviewing, I think he'd still be in tight straits, because he really didn't want to let go of his belief system in Tori. He still thinks that a lot of the information that she had to give was worthy and should have been out there, but if he's let go, I haven't seen it. I haven't. Yeah. You know, I mean, he talks a good talk, but I don't see it.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for that.
I think, well, what are your thoughts? And Brad gave us permission to have this conversation, and he knew that he knew it might be a little difficult, but it was actually his suggestion. So thank you, Brad, for allowing us to discuss you openly. But
you know, this is a man who never runs out of energy. He runs and then it's like, okay, gotta get some sleep. And then he's up the next day and he's running again. And he has been directionless a lot on and off for the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. I mean, it's just like he can't seem to find the right way to move forward. And he's had to retract his filing in court, the complaint, because of what's happened with Tori. And he hated to do that because we delivered that complaint in court. We delivered that to the supervisor of elections and to the Board of County Commissioners at a Board of County Commissioners meeting. So it was all very public. So he had to stand down and he had to take the withdrawal of that complaint, and he turned it into the same people, presented it in public on record. And he said why. And it was because he felt that, you know, he could no longer be associated with the Tori Says operation, and didn't want that behind him as a deciding factor in anything that the court might do on the filing. So he tried to get it done without prejudice so that he could file it again on his own. And I'm not sure how that went, but he just hasn't seemed to find himself.
Well, you know, that's a part of the process, and I can't speak to anyone's experience, but I can speak to my own. And whether or not we're willing to discuss or look inward and figure out that we are in a transitionary process or not, we are. And the way you just described being directionalist, all I think of is how I've felt over the last few weeks of, it's almost like you're on a ship for so long and it's heading in a direction, or used to the motion of the water, like Tori's crazy all over the place. You found some kind of like stability within the crazy madness. And then all of a sudden you realize that the ship has holes in it everywhere. You find yourself on dry land. And then all of a sudden there's like this, it's discombobulating. That's the best way I can say it. It has been
I think
years.
it's even worse than that, Ashley. I think
Yeah.
it's like being on a ship that was in rough waters and you were just getting to the point where you were going to throw up. And all of a sudden somebody says, we're sinking. And now you have to do something positive to affect a new direction to save yourself.
Yeah.
And how do you come up with something really?
Well, and then as you're doing that, imagine that you have all of these people attacking you for getting off of the ship.
That's
and
right.
telling people not to board the ship. Don't
Right.
board the ship. That's a bad ship.
Don't get in the lifeboats. You don't need that, folks.
Yeah. And then you get the kind of bullshit that Emmy pulled. That 13-hour day that she was in Brad's chat was, I'm glad it happened on a level because it showed me, and finally Brad got to see, like, there's a limitation to this kind of shit. There's a point where you have to block someone. So that's good. But
I did keep telling him that that had to stop. And he kept saying, no, I cannot be coming into my own site and banning people or shutting them down because I don't like what they're saying. That it has to be worked out within the site. I kept saying, you can't do that. She's had her time.
That you can't work it out with people who have an intention to destroy, and that their job is to never quit. But I think he understands that now, thankfully. But we do give people so much time and space. I mean, if they immediately tell us their intention, I'll still give them more time. I'm like, because I one thing is, you want to give both people time. You want to give the person who wants to argue with them and ask questions, legitimate questions, time to be answered. So when you cut somebody off, you're cutting off everyone's conversation. But when it gets to,
she wasn't even being rational.
She was not that person at all. And her tactics are some of the nastiest I've ever seen. It was disgusting. And I know exactly what her intention was. Her intention was to push him and push him and push him until the point where he, fell apart, got in his emotions, and started saying things that were cruel, to take that soundbite and to use it against him. And that's exactly what she's doing. And that's the one thing I would hope that Brad would learn, is just because someone's coming and pushing you doesn't mean you need to engage in that altercation. Because one, they want to get you emotional. Two, they want to consume your time so that you're still invested in this place. Because as much as they say we should just stop talking about it or whatever, no, they want us consumed in there. They want us in a place they can watch us. They want to still be able to manipulate us, because without that, it's no fun for them.
Well, I did say the way to handle it is simply not respond to her. I mean, and I think that she'd already been at it for 10, 12 hours at that point. Like, why are you responding? Just shut her out. You don't have to ban her, but you do talk about something else.
Yeah. So in the transition, you were talking about how he's still in it. I would say that another part of the process I like to say for him is, I think when I listen back, I don't have the dedication to listen to the amount that he does. I don't know how he does it. But when I do have like the peace of mind to actually listen to Tori and not get pissed off, I find that it's good, because it's reassurance for me of the lies and the lies and the lies. And maybe there's a little bit of that going on. We'd have to ask Brad. I think he wants to reveal her true intentions to others just by pointing out, and the clips that he's doing now does that brilliantly. As for each of us, though, it's just a matter of when it's beneficial for us personally, knowing that balance, knowing when to walk away. And, it's
John, can you stop? John, what? Can you please? We can't hear.
I didn't hear anything this time. But I think that it's different for each of us as far as like how we process leaving. And I think it is important. I have girls in the Misfits that are like, hey, okay, like, remember to take care of you first. Remember this. And I need those people to kind of tell me. Do I always take their advice? No. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. But we're all at different places in this. And to say that we should all just quickly be over it, and you're not saying that, but some people are saying that, I don't think is fair, because when you've dedicated 3 years of your time, energy, life, money, car, like literally gasoline, expenses, filings, hours and hours and hours of dedication, you're going to be pissed for a while.
Brad has committed all those hours. I don't know I don't even know how he came up with that many hours to commit, but he did. And a lot of you seem to be as wrapped up in this as he was. And it's got to be hard to stop. Truly.
For me, it's not even just stopping. It's almost like, and then this shouldn't be everybody's, but it's making sure that somebody is there to be a beacon for those to see. And it's not for everybody, but I know that one thing that is rampant in this community for those who speak out is they get intimidated. And so someone needs to be just as much of an asshole. And that's where I really do side with and relate to Brad. We have different styles of being an asshole, but when you have a figure that's as manipulative and controlling as Tori, and so many people personally, it's affected their lives for the worst, people who have given up their sobriety, people who have lost friendships, people who have lost family members and relationships because of this fucking crazy person. When you see all of that, it's going to keep going unless someone puts a stop to it. And so for me, I'm not wrapped up in what Tori's doing so much for her sake, because nobody knows who she is. She has the tiniest following. You wouldn't know it if you listen to her. You think she's this global phenomenon, but she really isn't. But the thing is, she affects real people's lives, and she has gummed up everything in the state of California that she possibly could connect to us. She's got us to gum up things in other people's groups. Her impact on the Patriot movement is really from the inside, blowing it up. What she's done in Ohio, it wasn't good enough to have her own followers chasing their tails. She had to go destroy every other movement. And this is why I'm passionate about it, because people like her, and I'm sure that Brad feels the same, are the reason we are delayed, the reason we look stupid, the reason we're not further along, and worse off, some people are getting their names put on lists that could cause them harm. So for me, it's not about, I'm not done with her or her content or the whatever. It's like, I look forward to the time that I feel released to move on with my life. And I'm hoping Brad does too, but someone's got to turn the other way and get on the offense with this bitch.
I'm fairly certain he's on the offense. He doesn't step back. He really doesn't.
I don't think, and I mean, what are your thoughts? Because I mean, we come across a certain way in text, and I know that Brad, you're stubborn, and I love you, but you're stubborn. And I know that he can be a dog with a bone, just like I can, but I don't think a lot of it. What do you think? I don't think it's just anger. I think that he's just tenacious, and it comes across as he's just this mad person. That's what they're trying to say. He's just angry all the time. That's not what I get when I talk to him at all.
No, Brad isn't like that.
No.
Tenacious is a very good word for him. He gets something in his mind that he sees as something that he can fix, something he can write, and he figures he's very good at seeing what needs to be done, getting it organized, pulling all the information together, and doing it. I mean, that is who Brad is. And it was one of the things that intrigued me about him after I first met him at the Community Patriots groups. He had all these plans for how to get people motivated, how to get everything done, things that people could pick and choose for themselves on how to make the group work well, because they knew themselves what they were good at doing. Take your skill sets, put them to use. But nobody was interested. It was really strange. Nobody was interested in the Community Patriots at that level either. They didn't want his help doing that. They had their own ideas on, let's do flag wavings, and that'll be important, I mean,
photo ops for bullshit.
Get nothing done. Let's stall this out in the burbs, and nothing will happen in DC either.
Let's go hold a sign that says join the suit outside the Capitol where no one's going to see it, but at least we'll have a photo op.
That's right. Except that I really do think that the people who are making a difference and then go do a photo op are asking to get hit by a car. because it's getting to the point where people are getting hurt.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
even here, we're cautious simply because our sheriff's office is in the middle of a lawsuit for sex clubbing. And I just found out yesterday that Hernando County Board of County Commissioners has agreed to give $2 million to Citrus County to develop a Baker Act facility. And that if they don't get their act together, they'll keep their $2 million and build one of those facilities here in Hernando County. Now, I'm sorry, but this is all tied together. You know, this is taking the children, putting them into mental institutions. We know what the history is on mental institutions. Now you're going to have the sheriff's office that's going to be enforcing this. And we've already had, Brad's been removed from various meetings by the police because they didn't like what he was saying. They didn't like that he was being loud. He never got in anybody's face per se, but he was loud. But the police are involved. So now the police know him too. So if the police are involved at other levels, there could be a danger.
Yeah.
Clear and loud. You know, so what you're doing on your level is not just there. You have to realize that it's all interconnected, because some of the people that are getting hurt, that are getting damages from as in retribution for what they're doing with the Tory group, it's more widespread than even just, you know, somebody keying a car or slashing tires. Sugar in a gas tank is going to make a big difference. And now we're starting to talk money damages, and one of these days it could be a physical accident. There's no telling how far people are willing to go.
You mean connected with the Tory community?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean the stories I've heard, it's the things that have been done. It's like low level mob shit.
Yes.
It's pretty, and those people are dealing with it in a way that I can't talk about it, and I'm grateful that it's being done. Things are being done about it, but yeah, it's definitely criminal type of stuff. And I think that the louder people are, and the more people that speak up and bring it to the light, the better. I mean, I've been threatened by Emmy recently. One, she doxed my name in a chat I wasn't in, said my full name. And it's ironic, Tori brought up my full name, my last name, last week or so, with this random creepy threatening, nothing to do about me, but she was talking to me because she's like, this is a very common name. Now people can go find my name. I'm not that hard to find. The point is, puts out my name, and then Emmy's doxing my name in private chats. And then she says, I'll read it real quick because it is important. A chat that I'm not in, because she's accusing Brad of imitating me in this chat. And he's like, oh, by the way,
telling me about that.
And I was like, Brad, do a voice message. And he didn't know. I was like, just do a voice message and be like, do I sound like Ashley? And I was like, they'll probably say that you changed your voice. So he figured out the voice message thing, luckily, but he sent me, she said, you'll never for a day in your life ever worked. You never for a day in your life ever worked on anything as important as emergency plans. Stop lying, Ashley Joe blank from California. And then she's talking to Brad, but she thinks it's me, whatever. And then she says, again, you have never met me, Ashley, but you will. Count on it. So talk to a lawyer the next day. That's 100% a threat. And so that's definitely going to get taken care of. Everyone needs to do this stuff. If I want everyone, like the things that I've heard about people coming to people's homes, I know that, like, if that happens to me, like the people that it happens to tend to be quiet and intimidated. Like, I'm the person that you need to take me out because I'm going to film it all. I have cameras everywhere, and then I'm going to put it all over YouTube with your real name. I'm going to bring your actual name that I have out into the public and all of that. So I try to be respectful. I don't dox people, but you know, people need to speak up when this stuff happens, because you're absolutely right. It is dangerous. And the more of us that speak up, the less it's going to happen. And the more that it leads to Tory, the quicker it's going to end. Well, because I guarantee that if these people start going to jail, they're going to roll over on her.
We don't know. I mean,
if it came from her, but it's interesting. It's all the people surrounding her.
this is a cult, and they look at the Jim Jones cult. They were willing to take poison for him. So who knows how far this goes?
Well, let's transition into off that point, into the mind control thoughts and kind of wrap it up with that kind of stuff. So you were, when you were younger, involved in the Silva mind control. Can you kind of go into what that is? What got you even to go do that?
Silva mind control was sort of predicated on the basis that each of us have psychic abilities, and it's complicit in humanity. It comes with the package, and that we can develop it to help us with some of or a lot of the issues that are confronting us physically, mentally, emotionally, to make ourselves stronger, better people, also to become better focused in your life, to see, and this is where it leads from different time zones and spatial concepts, because they believe in time travel. They believe that it's possible to do out-of-body experiences. It was all kind of wrapped up. But I know that Jose Silva, who was the man who developed the system, was doing it because his kids needed help. And I don't know how he came up with this system. I'm sure he was psychic to start with himself, and he just included it in it. I was probably within the first couple of years of classes. I took all the classes. I still do meditations. I still do healings, energy work. But I had gone back for a re-up, having taken all the classes. The re-ups were free, and I walked into a cult situation. It was
drastically different from the first time you were there.
Completely different. I mean, completely different. That's all I can say. There was one teacher back when I had taken, I think it was in my 4th or 5th class, way back when, who was already trying to develop that sort of a situation in his class, but it wasn't, he was the backup teacher. He was the assistant in that class. And he did eventually take over that class, and he became like a cult leader too. And it was very frightening. I mean, we got up and we left when the entire class told us if we didn't like it to get out.
So how did what led up to that? Because you had told me you had asked a question or questioned something they had said.
The instructor was going over materials. I was under the impression that a lot of the people there that day were people who had taken classes with him before, and he was like a refresher for almost most of them. I mean, this was his regular group of people. There were probably 10 or 15 people that were new. From what I could gather, we were all on the outside, weren't talking to any of the regular group. But the whole approach for Silva was reconfigure everything that you're saying so that it was set in a positive frame rather than you can't do this.
Wait, okay.
You can't do that.
You said the whole thing was you cut out. So can you repeat the last part?
All of a sudden I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
My internet. There we go. Okay.
Okay, so start back where you said the whole thing was Silva, and you were talking about a positive experience, but I didn't hear that. So go back and say that again.
Everything that they were teaching us was supposed to be applied in a positive aspect. You did not say you cannot, or you will not, or you are unable. It's you can do this, but not you can't do this. And everything he was saying was you can't. And I kind of, stupid little me that I was, I raised my little hand and said, do you hear what you're saying? I mean, you've probably said this so many times, you just don't hear it anymore. And this guy in the back of the room turned around to glare at me that I would take his teacher to task. And he said, yes, I do hear you. So he went on and he did it again. And I thought, okay, well, it takes a while to correct it. Then he did it again. So little hand up back. The third time I did it, the entire class turned around and glared at me. And this one man who had been looking at me over and over, he said, if you don't like it, get the fuck out, period. And we picked ourselves up and we left, and I never went back. They were owned people. That was a cult.
Yeah, they are owned people. That's it. So it's a couple things I noticed. you essentially not only saw a change in him, and it does seem to be there is a very real pattern in cult dynamics where they start off, they have to bring people in. So it's all this beautiful messaging. And then at some point, it starts to shift into something else. But at this point, you got people on the hook. They're loyal to you to a bigger degree. They have time, money, love, loyalty invested. They're pot committed to you on so many levels. And then that's when the messaging starts to change and you start to test it. I'm sure that he had to test it a little before he before he got to the point where his message was completely different. But the thing I noticed is that you were using his own words, previous words, to challenge his current words.
That's right. I did. And it was not taken in a positive light. They did not want to change back to the original teaching.
That's something I've noticed for sure in this community is like the majority of things people are saying, even that I've said against Tori since, is her own words. It's like, no, like I learned, and I believe in her original teachings. They were true, period. Whoever says them, they're still true. Trust your gut. You know what I mean? And especially when it comes to authority and titles and tiaras and, how are you the underdog? All of these messaging are very positive and beautiful. But then when you realize, if you follow her long enough, you'll become the person putting the boot on the faces of others. That seems to be the pattern. Then all of a sudden it's like, now, how are you the underdog turns into get the underdog. And it's interesting I also wanted to bring up how you mentioned they said to you, if you don't like it, leave.
Yes.
That's something huge that I found. If you question, that was said today by UC, sorry to dog on you, girl, but you did call me a hoe. When someone asked a question, a legitimate question, it was met with, if you don't like it, leave. And I'm like, This isn't even Tori saying it. This is just some random admin who is now telling people, if you don't like what I say in this public space that's supposed to be for freedom and for patriotism, then you need to leave. And it's interesting that you saw that happen there.
And that was 45 years ago.
How do you grow if you're not able to question as a community?
Well, I don't think you can, but they had already abdicated their free will.
Yeah.
They had given it up already. You can't bring people back from that until they decide to do it for themselves.
Do you think it's part of it? Do you think part of it is there's you're going to get it when when you're groomed, which I believe is exactly what Tori is doing. She breaks down, builds up until, like I said earlier, you become this malleable clay and you learn over time. I knew how I could have became her main chat admin. I could have totally done it. I could probably go in tomorrow. It would take me longer now that I'm saying this. I could go in tomorrow with a new account and within a few months build trust by being nasty and shitting on everyone who had questions. And eventually I'd probably become one of Tori's trusted admins. I know exactly how to do it. So do you think that aside from the grooming that, these people are turning on others just for that cookie, just for that like approval of the leader? Or do you think that they actually become these people where their values and their morals are just out the window?
I think you do become eventually, if it's gone on long enough, you do become the people that you've set yourself up to be. I mean, how can you not? Because every time you go a little bit farther into something and you're willing to do something else that's a little less ethical or a little less moral, you're giving up a part of yourself each time.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you run out of ethics and you run out of morals. And you may be able to say, I'm a travesty. I can't even find my way back from here. But in the meantime, you have become a person of a certain amount of power in your own right within the organization.
Yeah.
And you don't want to give that up either, because you've got a place, you've got a niche and there's a home for you. Whether it's a home you would have chosen previously or not is irrelevant, really, because this is where you've gotten to. And so until you're willing to step outside of the niche and give up the power and give up the glory and say, this is wrong, I recognize it, I can't do it anymore. Until you get somebody to get to that point, you cannot stop them, you cannot help them. They're set on their path.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when your morals and your ethics becomes approval from one leader over every other person,
That's right.
there is no saving that person until, unfortunately, I don't know, they're gonna have to fall again off that ladder. But yeah, it's
I don't even know
interesting.
what it's going to take to get them to that point, because
I don't
you didn't wait
either.
that long. I mean,
Well, I first of all, it was never in me to step all over people.
no.
I think like Wonderland and I have a similar story where I think she was in it longer, and she definitely sees it now, but because she was groomed early on, as far as she was in the early days of Tori, when she was saying, you guys, we need to protect ourselves from infiltrators. And I think early on, ingraining that in people's brains definitely made her feel she was doing the right thing. And there was a brief time when I was also new to this situation where I was like, I'm doing the right thing, until I realized, like, wait a second. And then when it happens to you, and you are the infiltrator, you are the terrorist, you are all the things that you've been told other people are, then 100%. And that's why it gets hard for me when someone who has been through it to the degree that they have has the ability to turn and do it to another. Because I'm trying to look at it like, are you gonna stand, like, if the right person in government approves of you and you maybe get a little position or a seat at the table somewhere in the real world, not on Telegram, and your neighbor starts getting taken away and they're gonna put him on a train for some shit, you're not gonna stand up for me. You're not gonna stand up for your neighbor. We're back to Nazi Germany bullshit. And so that's all I can think of when I watch this behavior happen. And like the girl who wrote in yesterday, she was like, I'm used to getting deplatformed, I'm used to getting censored, but to have it happen within a place under the guise of the truth community, it just stings harder, because you're almost blindsided by it. You're told it's a refuge, and then
And then it's
this
not.
abuse, this constant abuse. And then people like Brad or myself are angry, and all of the people, well-meaning people, please don't stop giving me your feedback, or Brad your feedback, because we can still grow and we still have blind sides. But there are people who have been so used to being pressed down and groomed and suppressed that they're just like, you guys just need to be nice about it, you just need to. And it's like, no, fuck that. Like, there's a part of me, and then Brad as well, that's like, this is so wrong and devastating. And it hits home for me too, because I was in those 3 cults when I was younger. I think we've all been in some sort of a cult, but it's been 20 years since I fell for it. So the fact that I fell for it again under the political guise was something I wasn't expecting. But there's a part of me that I'm closing a chapter, because when I left those cults, I didn't get to tell them fuck you. I didn't get to warn everyone in it. I just left, and I got deemed a certain way with my tail between my legs. So now this is my opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to light your stuff on fire for a change. How does it feel?
Yeah.
And I know it'll end at some point for Brad and I'm looking forward to that moment for him, for me. But I think there is something about tying up loose ends and closure and saying that we're worth fighting for, and all the people that we love and we see happening to are worth fighting for as well. And I see people find courage every week, and that gives me such incredible inspiration. But
See, I
it's
did the same
heartbreaking.
thing you did. I did the same thing when I left Silva. I never made a fuss about it. I did call in once to a supervisor to place a complaint, but other than that, I didn't follow through on anything. And I've never been in that position again, and I've never allowed myself to be.
Yeah.
And when this came down with Tori Says, I stepped back a long time ago, and I didn't even want to know if it was going to get this far. But it was real obvious with Brad that he was already there, and he likes to think he wasn't, but he thought the world of Tori, and he thought she was going to save us, or at least save Trump. And
Yeah.
it didn't happen, and it isn't going to happen. And he's ready to fight too. So he's in the same shoes you were in.
I've noticed that for the people who loved her the most and trusted her the most, maybe, and Brad might not admit to that, but I definitely did. I worship the woman. I think the anger is a little more strong in those of us. Like in Misfits, we don't hold back. Like not everyone's ready for the conversations we have in there, but it's important to acknowledge anger. I believe that, we have such a nice society, especially on the right, where it's like, oh, we have to be nice and we have to be this. And it's just like, if I don't acknowledge anger, I'm not integrating my whole self. I'm actually not respecting a part of me that deserves to be loud. There's a righteous indignation that, if you suppress it too long, there could be an equally damaging backlash. So you got to have that place where you open your throat chakra and just say all this shit. And like, that's why I love it.
You can't keep shoving things in a little box inside, because eventually you get too many things in there. It's going to
Yes.
spring open on you someday, and it's going to cause you more trouble than it's worth, than just to admit, acknowledge, recognize, and allow it to happen.
Exactly.
You have to be able to get angry about it. But part of it is you're angry at yourself for having allowed it.
That's something that happens every day. I see it and I say it. Someone will always be like, damn, I was so stupid. Like, I can't believe I believe this. And it's okay to have those moments too. It's just like,
but at least having them.
Yeah.
Some people
we have to unpack it. Like, that's for me. They say, moving on or understanding something, getting over fear, whatever, is all about understanding it. Like, I think that information, education, and understanding is the way that we take charge in our own life. And if you can't evaluate it and examine it and look at it and like pick it apart, you're not going to see where you went wrong. Wait, where's the parts that I went wrong? Why did I do that? How do I not repeat that again in my life in some way? How do I make sure this never happens again? And yeah,
but there are good things that came out of it too. I mean, there was something. There was some attraction when you first entered into this agreement with Tori. There was. You saw a lot of. There was just an amazing future ahead for everybody involved, and back then it was Trump too, and for figuring out how to get it all back. What I see with where the organization is now is that when it does implode, what's going to happen is Trump is going to be the one that's taking the fall for it.
That's exactly the point, I believe. Yeah. And this whole like push for running independent and destroying the two parties, that's not what Donald Trump's doing. He's smart enough to know when our country's in such a dire situation like it is now, like we've never seen, like my lifetime, this level of change in a very short amount of time, drastic change implemented. And when you're in that moment, you don't rewrite the whole thing. You don't rebuild it from, and so Donald Trump is right to stick with what we have and look at all the cleaning out that's happening in the GOP. Obviously, it's far from perfect, but that's another thing, I haven't mentioned, but I think that Tori has a way of getting us to distrust every person to the point where we're just looking at people as bad, good, and her actions or her ideas to fix it are very anarchic. It's almost like destroy the whole thing and start over. And like, no, like you don't just it's just but as I'm looking at these politicians now with my own ears and my own mind, and I'm giving them a little bit of a shot. Like, well, none of them are perfect, but the idea that they're all corrupt is just such a nihilistic way of thinking. Yes, the majority of them are, but this is what we have to work with. And so if we can hold their feet to the fire and, Kevin McCarthy is going to do a couple decent things, then let's be happy, and I think that Donald Trump understands that. I think that Donald Trump is like, I'm working with bullshit, but I'm going to do my best. And what he's done is taken over the GOP to the point where his endorsement means everything. And so it's better to keep people in line through that avenue that Trump's using than to just say, screw the GOP, let's start independent. I'm like, no, you don't break it down in the middle. Independent isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, you have to have a foundation. There has to be a basis for everything.
Even if it's shitty. Yeah. No, she's definitely,
I think she's gone so far beyond the original intention for the group that nobody even recognizes where they were to start with.
Because they don't even, and then this whole attacking everyone for their ideas along the way. Now it's all federal stuff, and she can just drop anything, and people are so desperate to feel like they're doing change. They just blindly do it immediately, but they are not in their backyards. Not saying people aren't. You are. Brad is. You guys are still involved locally. Multiple people are. But anything that pertains to Tori is not local. It's all federal government, Assange, and I don't think this is about Assange. I am for supporting Assange. it's all this big stuff that we're not going to see. And like I had Kathleen on, she was talking about the importance of local stuff and understanding it. And I really do think that that's where it is politically.
I think we made a big mistake by getting off the local level.
Well, and then she goes further and sabotages by removing our hardest workers herself. Like my friend Audra. Audra had the biggest movement in California, still does. And it's not just Tori Says, it's all of these groups. She works with everyone. And she has made them, her and those people in San Diego have made the biggest impact in our state. And Tori removed her from our group with no explanation, leaving her to believe that she was keeping her in, letting her still say her name on every podcast. Like, that's just straight up evil.
Oh, now there's a frightening thought. Is Tori really as evil as everything else that we've been combating?
I believe so. If her background is what she says it is, if you rewatch Shadowgate, which I would encourage everyone to do, and listen to her considering that maybe she's actually implementing the things she's discussing in Shadowgate on Telegram, you'll hear it differently. If her background is what it is, and her sister's background is certainly verifiable, they come from a family of people who are deeply entrenched, ingrained in all of this and the connections. So if I were to deploy an operation to break apart the MAGA movement, to try to get close to Trump and everyone close to him and discredit him in a subversive way, if I were to blow the tank up from the inside, I would do it how Tori's doing it.
He's doing a very successful job.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I think you and Wonderland and a lot of the other people are doing a wonderful job breaking down the organization that she set up, or the way it's being set up now.
Well,
there are a lot of people.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think you're doing a good job tearing down the walls that she's put up.
Thank you. I think that there's an obligation that I feel too, because for years I was telling everyone to listen to her. I mentioned her on my podcast multiple times before this. I was telling people on Instagram, I'm trying to delete some of the stuff, leaving some as a record, but I was pushing her for so long. So I feel that I have a responsibility to go talk to the people that I was pushing her to and tell them otherwise. I've learned more. But to kind of end this on a positive note, like you said, we're doing something to stop it. And I think that's beautiful. And I wanted to bring up that I think it's really important that we talk. And this is the reason that these types, anyone who wants control doesn't want people communicating outside of their purview. So I think it's really powerful that we're communicating. And every day we get new people added. I want to thank you to all the people. There's a lot of people in Brad's chat who are watching, who are afraid to speak, because if they do, they'll get removed from their communities and their friendships and their staterooms and all of that. So to everyone watching, I understand. Keep watching. But the thing is, the power of us talking, especially in Misfits, it's kind of phenomenal, the kind of information we put together when we all have our little piece of the puzzle. And that's why they don't want us talking. So I think it's just important that we all keep having these discussions.
Oh, it has to go. I'm kudos to you for starting this up. Seriously.
And Brad, I mean, just his courage. I told you, I don't know, we were talking on the phone and I'm like, man, he's not going to stop, is he? And you said something like, at our age, you just don't give a shit.
Well, it's true. I mean, if this is what we're here to do, then so be it. And we are old enough to have seen an awful lot by this time. And this is some of the worst that we've been seeing, sadly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're both of you doing a fine job. That's why I stick by Brad. He really gets things done. Just have to get his rudders back in the water.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit. He's like a boat going around in circles right now.
It's normal, but that's why he has you. You're it's important to have good friends around us who can see us from an outsider perspective. And when I talk to him, I love him so much. I really do. There's times that I'll yell at him.
Well, you two are a lot alike,
We
It's
are.
very funny.
We talked about that. We're the same person, only different gender and like different age. But no, but I he's receptive, and we need people in our lives who we can be like, wait a second, he said things to me where he brings me back into like, no, we need to do this a little. I'm like, okay, and I do the same with him where I'll have to yell at him like, wait, Brad. But
Yeah.
that's all we can do is like sharpen each other. And I for the thing that hurts me is this narrative about him being like this angry guy or whatever. I'm like, you treat someone like shit for a year and then tell them they're supposed to eat it and smile. And I think it's a really dark, sick way to be. And I would probably be just like him, you know what I mean, if I had dealt with the shit that he did and put in the work that he put in. And I am kind of like him, but I'm just saying, everyone wants everyone to just calm down and go away with their tail between their legs. And I'm like, where's the passion? Maybe that's why our country is so fucked right now, is because we all feel that way.
No, there's enough of us with the passion that I'm serious. I think we'll recover ourselves. It's not. I know a lot of people who were so upset with what happened in the last, probably give it 13, 14 years. That they have recovered their passion. And that has to come back. I mean, those of us who are older are already aware that we're on the downside of our lives. And if we're going to be doing anything to contribute to a better world for the kids, to even there being a better world again, because otherwise we could just become mainland China and everybody just kowtows. You got your picture of Mao Zedong on the wall, like Representative King from, what was it, Kentucky? And pretend to be good little people that don't have a thought in our heads. And that isn't going to happen. That isn't what this country was founded on. That isn't why all of our parents came here. My parents came from Germany and Poland right after World War II. And my father used to tell me back in the 80s, he used to tell me that we were already on the wrong path and we had to make changes, or he was afraid what was going to happen. And when he got dementia, I think he was concerned because he knew he was losing it, and he wasn't going to be able to help anymore. And that really scared him. But because I was on the other side, I thought it was all couldn't happen here, and it can. So for those of us watching, there's a lot of us. There really are, Ashley.
No, I know that there are, and I think that that's where my frustration comes, is that I've never been a part of anything like the 2020 experience, and finding all these people organically was almost like how it feels right now, leaving Tory. It's like the dust settling after a psyop, and then all of a sudden there's so much life in the grassroots moment of finding the freedom to just talk and share information when you're so hungry for knowledge about something, and then all these people are there to help. And the fact that there was a psyop waiting before I even knew what a psyop was. I was getting trapped by psyops that were like grabbing me, and like it's all the things when I look back, and it's not just Tori, it's like all of this the Q stuff or whatever. I don't know how you feel about that, but for me, it just, nothing ever good came of me talking about it, sharing it online. It just made me look crazy and led me down paths. And I had it right in the beginning because I was using my intellect, and I had Occam's razor. I'm like, I would look at the problem, whether it be something with Pfizer or COVID or whatever, and then I would think about it, and I'd be like, what can I do to help? And then I would start to do something that maybe was the best thing I could do. And it was so much more simple. And then it turns into, we all get like siphoned off into these groups where we're not thinking for ourselves. We're not thinking things through to the end, and all of the negative or positive repercussions of our actions. We're just blindly following orders. And I know it was intentional. And I think that I've said it before, but I do think we're having a reemergence of people waking up a second time, almost like, okay, fooled me once, fooled me twice. Now I'm out of it. I'm smarter, better for it. Like you said, it was a worthy experience because we'll have our feelers out to not get trapped again and as easily manipulated again, and to really think for ourselves. But now I feel like is that time to get back to work. We were all just emotionally responding to everything that happened since 2020. Like I never knew the government was going to do that shit, was going to slap something over my face. And that was really hard for me. That was really, it just felt like so abusive. Like I felt like a slave. And then the vaccine stuff. And so,
Well,
we
you were
were
supposed to feel like a slave.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would go to work and put it on for the short amount of time I did wear it before I ended up quitting my job. But I would wear it, and I the abuse feelings it was just reminding me of someone having their hand over my face, doing something against my will. And I would go into the car and just cry after every time. And I just knew in my spirit how wrong this was. And then to feel that real thing, and to know that we're in trouble here and we need each other. And then to have someone hijack your ability to fight back. It's a fire of anger that I think Brad understands.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm so looking forward, and I think the dust is settling. I think that people are calling out these types all over the place. I've noticed it in other communities. I think people are waking up like, wait, it's been 3 years now and nothing's come of this leader type. And so that's a beautiful thing. And that now is the time to really get back to the basics. And I don't know, what's your last thoughts on anything you want to share at all? And what do you recommend, for people that you see within this community? Because you see us with a little wisdom that we might not have as an outsider. So what would be your advice, recommendation, or hopeful message?
Well, I think the only way we're going to get ourselves out of this is to exert ourselves on a local level politically, and find something that is a passion for you, that you can do well. And like, I'm going back to working with the local politics. I'm going back to the local BOCC and the planning and zoning, and I'm going to try to affect a difference there. I met somebody yesterday at a BOCC meeting in Citrus County, which is Central Florida still. And she's working with a constitutional lawyer and figuring out how to approach the local level with ammo. So she has read the state constitution. She has read, I think she's getting the charter for Citrus County. This is where I can do some work. This is where I can make a difference. So we all have to look in our lives and find the places where we can make a difference, because not everybody can get on the telly and be talking. Not everybody has the gift of gab, but we all have something that's important to us. We have to find it if we've lost it, and start doing it. I mean, I could read books for the rest of my life and waste my life reading really good books and not living. And I refuse to quit, just because they told me I'm wrong. It isn't going to happen. I will fight harder, but at the local level. And I'm not going to have somebody telling me to divert my interests elsewhere. And kind of like my friend who has her priorities, and she gets so angry with everybody who's doing something different because she feels like she doesn't have any support to get things done that she feels are important. But you have to be able to do it yourself, and don't take off more than you can chew. Take more than you can chew. Find something that you can get done. That alone should restore your balance for yourself. And that's my last word on the issue.
That's beautiful. And I think that it's so much more simple. Like you said, it's just, we don't realize the power of the one thing that we do. If we do that one thing and we do it well, it's going to be different for all of us. And And it's actually more simple than we think. And I think that's where the danger comes in looking at the global politics constantly and focusing on the big figures. We're getting this like daunting, overwhelming experience of
And
like,
it's
what?
nothing we can do anything
We
about
can't
at
do
that
anything
level.
about it. Exactly. But you can know the people in your backyard, and you can know the people that, I mean, like Kathleen was saying, we have so much more power over getting board members, out. Or I watched it, I didn't watch it yet, but there's a documentary about Shasta County, California that had, they went to all paper ballots this
Oh,
last
excellent.
month. And it was just because of some farmers in this small group, and they have a documentary that I plugged on my last episode that I need to go watch. And I'm like, that is huge in California. That could set precedent for the whole state. And it was just a group of tenacious people who knew they needed to get out to, I believe, supervisors or board members. That's it. And they ended up getting them out, and they ended up having the will of the people in their county. And I'm like, if we could learn those types of skills, and also, I think it's important that whatever you're focusing on, you should love it. And because I like work, I like getting down to the work. There's certain projects that I was doing for my country that I really loved. And then there's ones that didn't feel right to me. And I think that find your vein that you can actually enjoy it, whether it's going to the school boards or, whatever. But
Find people at the school board or at the BOCC that are arguing on behalf of things that make a difference to you. And what your skill set, if you're skilled at researching, touch base with those people, see if you can help them with research.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do well. And at least that way, then you have 2 people or 3 people who are working to get, maybe one person is very good at doing the speeches, the other person is great at writing, and the other person is good at researching. Well, you get the 3 together and you've got a strong fulcrum to approach the meetings with. They can't beat you down when you're doing it right on all scores.
I love it. No, that's right on. That's perfect. I appreciate you so much for coming on. You've inspired me when you were talking recently. I was like, maybe I should have people come on and teach different skills. We could do little 20-minute clips, where someone's teaching how to speak at the board of supervisor meeting. Because not everyone that does that now started off confident, it takes time, and they could, or how to write this thing, or how to research this thing, or whatever. Like maybe just simplifying it and breaking it down to those things. I know that Brad is really excited, and I think that that's something that would help you, Brad, eventually transition away from this Tory stuff, is getting back to helping people, because that's what you're good at, that's what you're passionate at. So
it is. And you know what, you can do just about anything you put your mind to. The first school board meeting I went to speak at, my knees were knocking at the podium. I could hear them. It just, you get over it. You do it a couple more times and you get confident in what you're doing, and you can do it. Any more than what you're doing here. I'm sure you didn't walk in and you owned the airwaves your first time out.
Oh, I was so horrible to listen to. I literally, that's how I learned, though. I learned by listening back to myself. I mean, this is my, I think I've done around 70 episodes over the past couple of years. And I would listen back and hear my mistakes and then just get a little better every time. But you have to be willing to put yourself out there to get better at anything. And, it might be whatever it is,
Just find something that really takes your interest.
Exactly. You have to love it. You have to love what you're doing. There's certain things I love sitting down with my laptop and digging on things, and if I can find a way to help something, I mean, now it's Tori, she's giving me, but I do think that's helpful for our country to take down this operation. But whatever it is, you do have to enjoy it. But I just thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a joy and pleasure to have you. And yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You take care, Ashley.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.